Now, in times of crisis, getting the advice of an expert can make all the difference. Not only can they help you navigate your way through a difficult situation, but they may be able to identify the most cost-effective way to get things done. So you can really understand why the man in our next story took up an offer of help that he received after disaster struck. But I'm afraid instead of this particular business saving him time and money, he'd now say that it's ended up costing him much more of both. November 2015, and retired architect Steve Prestage had just returned from church.
Holy mackerel.
He was faced with a scene he'll never forget.
Firemen everywhere and hoses everywhere, and they're spraying my house as it's going up in flames. There's flames shooting 70 feet in the air.
An electrical fault had caused fire to sweep through the home that he'd shared for 30 years with his partner Tina. I'm afraid the result was catastrophic. Tell me what was going through your heart and your soul and devastation at this point.
It's so difficult to put it into words, the feelings. Basically, shock takes every emotion out of you. Oh my God, it is. What do I do now? And you just stand transfixed looking at it.
The interior of the house, including all personal possessions, were completely destroyed. But for Steve, the fire was just a prelude to a much bigger and long-running battle that has lasted 3 years. It started when, surveying the still smouldering shell of his former kitchen, he was approached by a man he'd never met before who believed he might be able to help him. He accidentally, or just happens to be on the spot, comes in, and what does he try to sell you or assure you of?
Well, he tells me that I will have a terrible job getting a reasonable deal from my insurers, and he can help me make it, I'll get a much better claim.
The man described himself as a loss assessor, someone you engage to negotiate on your behalf with your insurance company to maximize your payout. So thinking it would speed up his claim and ensure he received the best possible payout, Steve signed up on the spot. But he says it was only after he signed that he was told the service would cost him 10% plus VAT of any money he received. And in any case, there was so much going on, it was really hard to take in everything that he was being told. Did you have any reservation at all at the time about taking his help?
No, because when you're looking at a house burning down round your ears, you clutch at any straw. And all I had to do was just sign up, and yeah, why not?
And you signed up that day too?
Yeah, it all looked official, and it was all stamped up, names and all legal speak, as you might say.
So that he could remain near his house, Steve moved into a caravan in the garden provided by his insurers. He then drew up a list of his belongings and sent it to the loss assessor so it could begin negotiating a payout on his contents insurance on his behalf. Eventually, the firm negotiated a payout of £50,000 for Steve's belongings, the maximum allowed by his house contents policy. But it then took £6,000 of this as its fee, leaving him with just £44,000. Steve feels it just wasn't value for money, and when it came to negotiating the building's insurance payout, the money Steve would get to rebuild his property, he says it was a similar story. After 2 years of toing and froing, the loss assessors told him it had secured a cash settlement of £250,000, which meant that after it had taken his fee, Steve would be left with just £210,000. So unhappy with the quote, Steve told the company he was cancelling the contract and instead would negotiate with his insurance company himself.
I said, no, go to blazes, I'm not interested. And I went back to my insurers, negotiated direct with them, and they gave me 260 grand.
So you must have been pretty happy with that.
Well, it was more than the loss adjuster said they could get me from my insurers.
But the loss assessors weren't quite so happy with Steve. The company started legal proceedings against him in order to get his 10% of the payout he'd been awarded, even though he'd negotiated this larger amount himself. Keen to avoid a potentially lengthy and very expensive legal battle, Steve settled out of court and ended up paying a reduced fee of £22,000 to the assessors. But he's very disappointed that an arrangement with someone who was meant to make things easier for him has ended up being such a saga, as well as leaving him out of pocket. So who or what is this mysterious trade that turns up on your doorstep so soon after such a devastating event? Well, for Steve, it's made all the more confusing by the fact that the company he was dealing with called themselves loss adjusters instead of loss assessors. In fact, the two have very different roles, as consumer rights expert Martyn James explains. So, Martyn, what is the difference, just for clarity, between a loss adjuster and a loss assessor?
The distinction's really important. A loss adjuster is someone that your insurance company will hire to assess your claim and look into what the insurance company needs to be paying you. They're a contractor for the insurance company. A loss assessor is somebody that you hire independently to act on your behalf so you can get as much money as possible for your claim, but you pay them. And the downside is, if it's not a flat fee, you're paying a percentage of the claim itself.
And yet, this company called themselves a loss adjuster.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be very confusing the way that these firms define themselves. They sound very official, but actually a lot of them work in exactly the same way as a claims management company. You know, the ones that we've talked about before, who are trying to sort out your PPI claim for huge amounts of money. And it's the same principle. Like with any organisation, there are some companies that do a good job and have a certain amount of expertise, but unfortunately there are far too many who are basically ambulance chasers and are getting money for doing very little.
Do we actually ever need that kind of person coming into a claim?
Well, in simple terms, Gloria, no. In the vast majority of cases, you don't need to pay someone a big chunk of your claim money to actually have a successful claim. There may be some sets of circumstances where it is useful to get an expert in, and some people want the peace of mind of having someone negotiate with an insurance company, but you shouldn't have to use a loss assessor and you shouldn't have to pay anyone to get a successful claim.
Meanwhile, although he's learned the hard way that employing a loss assessor might not get you the best deal, Steve is looking forward to getting his life and his home back on track. So how soon do you think you will start to erect some kind of building to live in?
With a bit of luck this summer.
Good luck with that. I hope it works out.
Thank you.
Thank you.